Hey, what's going on? My name's Robert and you are watching Southpaw Auto Works. Welcome to part one of a video series that's all about the GM Turbo-Hydramatic 400 automatic transmission, commonly referred to as the Turbo 400. In this episode, Andy will walk you through what it takes to get this unit completely disassembled. Without further ado, let's get the show on the road.
Okay, we're going to do a Turbo 400 disassembly for you here. Give you an idea of a couple things you need to know as you disassemble the trans, a couple things to look for. Still have our torque converter installed in here. Try and get that out. Okay. At the time, if we wanted to inspect the converter hub itself, I'm going to recommend on most rebuilds anyway that you replace the converter, but if the converter hub were not scored or damaged and you didn't have a lot of metal contamination and you wanted to flush the converter, back in the day we did reuse them. Start with some stuff on the outside of the trans. We'll get our linkage arm off of here. Get that out of the way. Speedometer hold down clamp. As far as getting this speedometer out of here, a couple choices. Pliers, you can grab a hold of the outside of that and try and wiggle it out. I'm going to recommend you wait because the pliers usually tear up the housing where your speedometer cable threads onto. We've got an option to knock that from the inside out at a later point, and I'll show you that. Okay. Take the tail housing off, but before I do that, at this point, I like to go ahead and knock the rear seal out. Otherwise, I have to chase it around the bench. Flat chisel works pretty good. If you're careful, come straight in, you won't damage the housing. You just got to chase it around. Nothing scientific about it. Be aware, get to this point, it's going to fly and it's going to throw some fluid around if it's full of fluid. So I'm going to hang on to it. That way, that out of the way. Take our extension housing off. This, by the way, is a two-wheel drive extension housing. 400s come in several different lengths of output shafts. Basically, that's the only difference on the 400. The rest of the internal components stay the same with some minor differences. We got the seal out. There is a bushing in here you're going to want to replace when we go to the rebuild section there. Next is governor cover, 4 bolts here. Pull our governor out. We can inspect that a little bit more carefully later on, but we're looking at the surface of the gear. This here where it rides in the bore, whether the valve is free. Modulator hold down. Take the modulator out. Most likely the O-ring is going to stay in the case. So we pick the O-ring out. No big deal. And then the valve, modulator valve itself. Either grab it with a hook, pocket, screwdriver, magnet, whatever the case may be, pair of pliers. Wiggle that out of there. This has one of the Ford shipping plugs in it, just to try and keep the weather out. Okay, we're ready to flip it over. This one's got the strawberry milkshake fluid in it. A lot of water contamination. Now, a little something I do, I always leave one of the bolts in on the pan, leave it a little loose. Show you why on that here in just a second. Now, whether or not the pan comes off here easily or not, looks like this is loose. There's a reason I leave the bolt in so that the pan does not come flying off of there and all the fluid splash all over the place. Just kind of holds it in place for me. And then peel it so we don't wear it. All right. This one's been sitting in the weather for quite a while. Got a lot of water in it. This is what they're going to consider to be an early Turbo 400. It has a very early style pan on it here, which matches the pickup tube on the filter itself. They only used this style filter for a few years. They deleted it and went with the flat style filter, replaced it. And that can easily be done by getting the pickup tube for the filter and replacing it with a different style pan. So let's get our filter out of here. Twist. It's just an O-ring seal between the tube and the case. That's all there is there. Oop. So lots of bolts on the valve body. 2 different sizes, 1/2 inch and a 7/16 on the head of the bolts. Most all are 1/2, and then you've got 3 of the 7/16 bolts. One, 2, and 3. If we didn't miss any, we should be loose. Oh, so much muck on there. There we go. There it is. Actually, I have some transmission fluid left in there. All right. Now, got governor tubes that stick down here. Need to get underneath those with a screwdriver. Lightly pry up. Those will come right out. Releases the valve body. Okay. I'm going to set that aside. Next is going to be the detent solenoid here. 2 bolts. And then disconnect the electrical connector at the case. That just pulls out. All right. That should release our separator plate here. Got a lot of rust. Most likely just going to replace that. You'll see that in our overhaul video. Be replaced with the shift kit plate. Front servo lifts straight up out. Spring, retainer, and a little washer there. Throw those in the pan. 6 bolts on the low reverse servo cover. Little bit of spring tension behind this, but not much. Here we can loosen a bolt slowly, just to make sure. Don't make too much of a mess. Cover off. Still a little spring tension back here, so we're just going to tap on that, twist and pull a little bit. All right. Got your return spring there, accumulator piston inside of the servo itself. I'm going to try and get the valve body gasket off the case. This one's stuck because of all the water contamination. The reason we want that off of there is we've got a bolt hidden underneath here that we've got to access. A lot of people don't know about this bolt. It's going to be hidden down here. Gasket scraper. Maybe to get some of our gasket off. There we go. Hard to see because of the water that's in there. All right. What you're going to need is a 3/8 12-point socket, chrome, thin wall. In this one, we've just modified it, ground a little bit of the outside diameter off because there's not much room between the head of the bolt and the pocket that it sits in the case. So we've got to have something really, really thin to go down in there to grab a hold of that. I like to break this loose by hand with a ratchet first. Can be kind of tight. Then we can zing it out the rest of the way. If you don't remove that bolt, you're only going to get disassembled about halfway down into the case, and the rest of the components will not come out of there. So we get that out of our way right now. We do have check balls in the case to remove. I'm not going to go through and pick all those out right now. There's 6 total in the case. Rebuild video will show you how to know where they are reinstalled.
Real quick, if this content is adding value, please let us know by hitting that like button. It does help the channel, and we do appreciate it.
Same thing on the front seal here as the rear seal. I like to knock that out right now while the pump is still bolted to the case. Oh. Looks like we're disturbing a few spiders, but front seal out. Okay, pump bolts. The number of pump bolts will vary on what year the transmission was manufactured. Some will have more than others. Okay, now getting the pump out of the transmission, several different ways. They make pullers that can hook on here, push on the input shaft, pull the pump out for you. There are actually 2 holes in the pump that are threaded where you could put an actual slide hammer into, knock the pump out. What we're going to do is what we consider kind of the flat rate way without any of the specialty tools. What we're going to do is come in with the large screwdriver down in through the access, if you will, right here in the case. Now I'm going to use the case as leverage coming in behind the pump and see if we can break this thing loose. All right. Got lucky on that one, came out pretty easy. With the water contamination, a lot of times they'll stick in place, gasket will. Okay. If we want to take a quick look in the pump, 5 bolts. Okay. It's what's known as the pump cover, stator support itself. We're looking for a major amount of wear there where these gears ride against this. Right now we've got some rust to deal with. It's known as a crescent style pump that GM uses in the 400. Inner drive gear, lugs to the hub on a converter. I'll just show you that real quick. Okay. One of the items you're lugging the converter into when you install it right there is that inner drive gear. Outer gear stuck in there a little bit there. We're going to have to pry it out. Water contamination. We've got rust in here. We'll have to clean this up, inspect this. This is the reason they call it the crescent pump, because it's got that little crescent in there. Common wear item on the gears. We'll talk about that on the rebuild video.
According to my analytics, many of you have not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any future videos.
Okay, input shaft, forward drum. Comes right out. Has a direct clutch hub on it there. We'll set that aside for now. Next is the direct drum. Sometimes a little tougher to get out because you don't have a good way of grabbing the drum itself. Sometimes a hook type pick or something in here behind the spring retainer. Sometimes you can grab it with your hand. It just depends. Get enough of it. Get her out of there. All right. Direct clutch drum, one-way clutch on the back there. Band surface here. You can see where it's kind of clean where the band was riding, away from the rust. Sun gear shaft has come out with it. Okay. That splines to that direct drum itself. Next is the band. All we do is grab opposite the side of where it's anchored. Pull out a little bit. Wiggle it there. Should come out. If it doesn't, we just screwdriver in behind it. That's where it anchors to the case. That's where it wants to stick on us. So we just simply pry that away from the case itself. Allows us to release that. All right, next is the intermediate clutches. We've got a snap ring around the outside diameter that we've got to release to get those clutches out. So long screwdriver down in there with a pick and grab it, or a hooked screwdriver. Right. Got her there. That's the snap ring retaining the intermediate clutches. Pull those out, two hands here, and get a hold of them. Intermediate clutch back. Okay, another snap ring to deal with, little beefier, and it's a tapered snap ring, not a flat snap ring like the intermediate clutches. Once again, any way we can get a hold of that, pry it away from the case with a big screwdriver. Normally what we do is we take one of these screwdrivers and we grind a little hook in the end of it. That allows us to hook that snap ring at the same time. What I'll do here is twist it, try and release it, and grab it with my pick, pull it towards me, get it started out of that groove. All right. Work it a little bit. And just keep doing that all the way around the case. All right. Like I said, a little beefier snap ring, takes a little more work. But there is actually a taper on the top side that faces you, flat on the bottom, faces the center support.
While editing the video footage, it became quite apparent that the camera operator did not do a great job of capturing the removal of those last two snap rings.
Okay, so we wanted to give you a little better view here of removing the intermediate clutch snap ring. So we've highlighted it for you, and we're refilming it to try and give you a better view of that, and give you a better idea of what's going on. So we're going to come in here with our screwdriver, grab that snap ring, pull it up out of the groove, work around a little bit here. Okay. That guy comes out. Then our intermediate clutches come out. And then we've done the same thing for you for the center support snap ring. Tried to highlight that for you so you can see that better. Once again, same thing. I'm going to come in here with a screwdriver. Try and hook that snap ring. We get that guy out of the case, and then we can remove our center support. Okay, now we should be able to grab most of the rest of the trans and just yank it on out of here with the gear set. Okay, I'm going to grab the larger part here, the center support. That's going to kind of come out by itself. It took one of the Planetaries with it. Okay, that's our center support there. Front Planetary. One-way clutch on the front of that. And on the back came out one of the plastic thrust washers. Then we grab the main shaft. That should allow us to pull out the rest of the Planetary gear set plus the output shaft. Right. A little wiggle and a jiggle. Okay. They call the silencer ring there. Got another 4-tang washer off the back. Sun gear comes out of there next. A couple of Torrington bearings also we'll deal with in the rebuild video. And one of the last things down the case is going to be the rear band, also known as a low reverse band. Once again, it's anchored on part of it. If we grab opposite where it's anchored, okay, we should be able to simply release that, pull that out. All right. Anchor side has the two anchors. Apply side is over here where that servo connects. And one last thing at the very bottom of the case is going to be our thrust washer, which is selective to control the rear end play. Okay, that's it. We've got the 400 torn down. Check balls are coming out of there, the rest of that contaminated fluid. Okay. One last thing before you do a cleanup. Probably a good idea to go ahead and remove this case connector right here. All right. 11/16 box end wrench. Take that box end, put it over that case connector right there, and then kind of push in with your thumb towards the case. All right. Grab the connector, pair of pliers, wiggles it right out of there for you. So what we did here from inside the case was we pushed in on this wrench and used that to compress those 3 fingers on that connector. Allows us to slide it right out the side of the case. When it goes back in the case, those fingers will lock it into the case itself. Okay, so we've got the transmission pretty much apart. We've got most of the stuff out of the case. One last thing we've got to do is get the speedometer housing out. I'm trying to show you a couple different ways of removing this speedometer housing and speedometer gear. Mentioned it before. A pair of pliers, you can grab the outside of the housing here, but you've got to be careful. It's an aluminum housing and you can damage the threads for the speedometer cable. You can try and grip it here with a pair of pliers, grab it and try and wiggle it out of the case. Many times, especially if it's weathered, it's not gonna come out of there very easily. So what we're gonna want to do is roll the case over and try and access it from inside out, either using screwdriver or a long punch and hammer, and just tap on that housing, not on the gear. There we go. There's our housing, driven speedometer gear there. One last note here. You got a bracket down here with 2 bolts, okay, where your park rod comes into here and operates the park pawl, okay? Do not remove those. It's not necessary for disassembly or overhaul. That's it, we got her apart. The rest will be pulling the clutch packs apart, inspecting the clutches. In this case, because of the water contamination, it's an automatic. We're gonna replace all of the friction material, both bands, because the water contamination will cause those to simply just peel off of there. So even though these look like a really nice clutch, you can read the writing on them, they're a nice tan color, they've got to be replaced no matter what.
This show is a lot of hours to produce, and we could really use your help. Believe it or not, there are a number of ways that you can get involved. Check out the video description down below to learn more. Got Turbo 400 questions or just want to say hey? We would love to hear from you. Drop us a line in the comment section down below as well. You are watching part 1 of the video series on the Turbo 400 rebuild. In the next episode, Andy's going to be diving into inspection. He'll be taking a closer look at the clutch packs and the clutch drums, as well as the Planetary gear set, among other things. Andy and I have got a lot in store for you. That being said, make sure you A, subscribe, and B, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Once again, my name's Robert, and I will see you next time.